press play. He's the voice of the intersection of marketing, tech, and popular culture. Thinking is his commodity. DJ, data punk, stylish sock collector, and author of the book Disruptive Marketing. Jeffrey Colon is your host of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds.
It's another episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon, broadcasting live from the campus of Microsoft in Redmond, Washington. On this week's episode, we're going to get down and dirty with the best content strategist in the business. Melanie Deziel will be on the show, and we'll be talking to her about content and content marketing. Buzzwords that aren't really buzzwords if you really dive deep into what content is getting at. We'll also take a look at the launch of the new Twitter tech support for Apple. Yes, Apple. Are they going to start a center of excellence in social after not being there for many years? And also a highlight on social media in the current presidential election. That's sort of a primer for next week's episode when we have digital strategist Cheryl Metzger from Ogilvy & Mather, Chicago on our show. All that and more, Disruptive FM. Make sure you connect with us on Twitter. We're at Disruptive FM. And suggest either some people you'd like to hear on the show or some topics you'd love us to cover using hashtag Disruptive FM. Remember, it's the 21st century. We no longer live in a read-only society, but a read-write-remix society. So this past week, Apple announced the tech support Twitter handle. For those who are not familiar, Apple has not really used social media that much, which is quite interesting because it's 2016, and I almost thought they would never utilize social media. But I think this is a really good move for them in terms of how they're going to use social media. Less about amplification, really more about customer service. And we know that customer service is the new marketing. I'm actually really impressed with who put this program together. Ty Tran, who is Forbes 30 Under 30 and one of the LinkedIn top voices. He is working at Apple. And he actually helped put this idea together. We're going to definitely have to get Ty on this show to talk to him about a number of different things. He's constantly writing on LinkedIn, and I love his vision and foresight. But what is their plans in terms of maybe going beyond customer support? Because that obviously makes natural sense. You know, you want to be where your customers are, and Twitter's a great channel in terms of using direct messages and open tweets so that you can talk openly with your customers. And if somebody has a question that you answer, you can see that answer. And that way you don't have to ask that question again. So you can build that sort of nice rapport with your customer base. But I'm curious to see if they actually go beyond that and create a center of excellence, because there's not many of those at big giant companies. And I've actually consulted for many: Coca-Cola, American Express, Kraft, IBM. Now, of course, working with Microsoft. And it's interesting that many companies still don't put an emphasis on centralizing their social media operations. They really let local communities handle much of that sort of communication. And I feel it's actually bad design, because in some respects, you should have local voices on the ground. That's why I'm all for Twitter channels in different languages so that teams can run communications depending on the country that they're in. But I still think there needs to be a centralized voice or an area where you can intersect and integrate many of your answers, especially if you're more of a complex company like an Apple or a Microsoft or an IBM or a Dell or any of the companies, even startups, where you're constantly pivoting your business model. There's too many services that you're in. And it makes sense to centralize because you can figure out what the entire customer experience is and put that together, pull that together, and actually be able to talk about not just products when someone actually reaches out to you, but your entire holistic picture. And that's really where marketing is going. It's been there for quite a period of time, but I think now that digital has gone beyond digital and we're moving into a post-digital world where we're trying to interlap between what we do in our real physical lives as well as what we do online, it's going to take quite a bit of thinking on behalf of many of these companies in terms of how they pull together what we call experiential centers. So centers of excellence, social media labs, whatever it might be, it's definitely the trend for the future. Would love to know your thoughts on this topic. Again, hit us up at Disruptive FM on Twitter, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's Jeffrey with a G, Geoffrey, the British phonetic spelling, and last name Colon, Colon, the Spanish surname. So the other topic I wanted to get to this week before we speak with Melanie Deziel is the upcoming presidential election. We got a lot going on there in terms of social media, and I actually think, and I hate to say this name on my podcast, but I'm going to go there, Donald Trump really knows how to use Twitter better than some brands. I know, you're probably saying, are you out of your mind, Jeffrey? But he's very good at being spontaneous. He's very good at not necessarily driving a message, but getting feelings out of people. And that's really the essence of what makes social communications and social design, or social by design, so important in terms of how you intersect your true feelings with other people so that they can actually relate to that. And I think a lot of brands still, and a lot of companies, and even a lot of small businesses, and even a lot of thought leaders in some respects that should know better, they still really plan out too much of their communication. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't make sense in a world where you don't have to plan as much. You can just do. So you have a lot of this copy that you can see that it's going through tons and tons of revisions, which would make sense if you're trying to have, go through copy that would be on a printed advertisement. But this communication is very different. It's very fluid. It's very active. It's in real time. So it's interesting that a politician, one that is sort of an outsider, so to speak, is showing how brands should do it and how other people should do it. Not necessarily in what he's saying, but how he's saying it. And that's what we're going to get into on the next episode when we have Cheryl Metzger here, and we'll talk a little bit about the American political election and how social media ties into that. But for this week's episode, I wanted to bring on one of the best content marketers in the business to really talk about where content marketing is moving, where content strategy is moving, and where the world of native advertising is moving. Happy to have my second guest here. And what I mean by second guest is, for those listeners from the past 3 years, it's only been my voice, but my voice is boring in the collaborative world, so we love to bring the smartest, brightest, most curious minds onto the show. Last episode, we had author Tim Sanders. This episode, a woman I highly admire, and I think you're going to love if you get a chance to see her on the conference speaking circuit this year. She's got a great thinking here in terms of where the world of content is going. So welcome to the show, Melanie Deziel.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And Diesel like the fuel, or like Vince?
Yeah, like the actor, like the fuel, like the jeans.
Like the jeans, yes. And just a note here to our listeners, Melanie is the founder of M Deziel Media and the Overlap League, which talks all things content marketing. So tell us a little bit about some of the stuff you've been up to for those who are listeners of the podcast, and what you're looking forward to doing in the near future.
Yeah, so my background is actually in journalism, and I quickly made my way to sort of the branded storytelling world. So I have been a part of the founding teams of HuffPost Partner Studio. That's their, Huffington Post in-house content studio, of T-Brand Studio, which is the internal content marketing team at the New York Times, and most recently was working corporately at Time Inc., helping publishers and brands kind of find their synergies and create really engaging content programs. Most recently now I'm out on my own. I'm M. Deziel Media, working as a consultant, a speaker, and doing a lot of really exciting freelance writing projects as M. Deziel Media, and still running the Overlap League, which is my native ad newsletter, as you said. So getting to connect with a whole bunch of people in the native ad world and share some knowledge, share some open job recommendations, things like that. So it's been an exciting time. And as you mentioned, I've got a lot of conferences coming up, getting to do a lot of really cool travel. So hopefully I'll get to meet some of your listeners out there on the speaking circuit.
Yeah, I think they'll have a lot of nice things to say once they see you, because I think you sort of bring the A game in this world. And I meet a lot of content marketers, and I have to tell you, some of them, I think they just use the word, or they use the terminology similar to how maybe 7-8 years ago everyone was like, hey, I'm a social media manager, or I work in social media.
Yep.
But they really didn't work in social media. I think they just used social media. And I think the same thing's probably coming true when it comes to content marketing.
Oh, yeah. A lot of quasi-gurus out there. Everybody with a blog knows everything about content marketing these days. Just like you said, everybody with a Twitter account was a social media manager.
So tell us a little bit about what, we think about the fact it's still early 2016, content marketing still really on the tips of the tongues of a lot of marketers, a lot of businesses. They are really trying to use it to drive, resonance with their potential audience or current audience. What's missing in this area? What do you see a lot of marketers not doing that you wish they would do more of, or that you actually advise them to do more of, so that their marketing can be a little more effective?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things going on. I mean, in the earlier days of content marketing, in years past, we were really trying to sell the concept before we ever tried to sell a campaign, right? We had to kind of convince people that content was even worth their time, worth their energy, worth their resources. We're really lucky now that we're at a point where most advertisers, whether they're really in it or not, they've kind of accepted that content is a reality. They've seen that it works. They've sort of bought into the concept. Now, what that means is that they're not always turning to us as experts so often from a publisher standpoint. They're kind of coming to us and saying, hey, we know now. We know we need some content, and we want video, And so they're kind of coming in and doing a little more telling and a little less asking. And I think occasionally what that means is they're not getting the kind of quality that they would hope for. Like I said, in the early days, it was sort of a Hail Mary and acceptance that, we don't really understand this whole content world, and please, publisher, guide us into this world, help us learn how to storytell. And I think for some advertisers, we're seeing a little bit of overconfidence and a little bit of assuredness that's not always there yet. There's a lot more learnings that we can share with them from a publisher perspective, and I think what we need is a little bit more open-mindedness. We can come together really as a partnership and not just as a service. The best content comes when you've got a publisher and you've got an advertiser in a room working together, bringing together the best storytelling aspects and the best resources from both sides, and not just this model of someone walking in and saying, hey, I would like 3 videos on the following topic, less of a production house and more of a partnership.
You think about all the money that is thrown down a wasted void by organizations that unfortunately, they create content like you just said in that manner, and then find out later from someone like yourself, oh, hey, this is going to not work or not perform as well because it's not made for the channels that you're asking me to reach customers on. Meaning, you've made something that will fit well for a inbound campaign, but when you come to me and say, hey, how do we do outbound? You have none of the content that's really interesting because you haven't really they haven't dissected like you would how people behave, like how they're actually engaging with a lot of content. So I think there's a lot of mistakes, made there, which is okay to make mistakes, but it's another thing to actually, they wouldn't have to make all those mistakes. I think, as you noted, if they just asked the right people who could help answer that before they even went into production mode.
Well, right. And the other thing we could do is help manage their expectations, because luckily I think we're past this, but there was a brief period of time of a couple months where I would get requests from advertisers saying, we would like a viral video, please. And that was their directive. They wanted a viral video. Now, no other information about with what audience they wanted it to be viral, or, what emotions they wanted people to come away with. Did they want a heartbreaking video, a funny video, an informative and unique and surprising video, So I think there has been a little bit more of an understanding of, we want to reach these people. It's better to have, you could help manage their expectations and say, listen, we're not going to get you a viral video. We're not going to get you, Gangnam Style here, but we are going to get you a video that can reach the people you're looking to reach and, truly engage them in a deep way, get you, high completion rates and high share rates and things like that. But, manage those expectations about, the value of different metrics and what they can actually get out of it, and knowing what their directives are up front and their goals. It's a lot easier to do from the outset, like you said. Let's
turn the questions or my attention to something you mentioned, the word metrics. Mm-hmm. What are the metrics now? Actually, a two-pronged question for you. What are the metrics now that content marketers like yourself like to dissect and look at? But then also, what do you think could be the metrics in the future or the near future? And again, you might not have an answer to that, but I always like to ask because, I think you probably read an article recently where, because Social Media Week was going on in New York City, where Jonah Peretti, the founder of BuzzFeed, said, page views are irrelevant. Page views and unique visitors per month are irrelevant to us now. I mean, I thought it was interesting because a lot of website creators, content creators, that they still sort of use those metrics because I don't know if they know what else they want to use. So what are you using, or what are you seeing people use more? What are some of the things that you like to report on? What to you sort of is what to you looks like success?
Yeah, that's an important conversation. I think, again, it's sort of evolved as we've gotten deeper into the content game as an industry. I think up front, people were looking for those typical metrics that they were used to from digital media. So they were looking for impressions. They were looking for click-through rate. If the money was coming from more of a direct campaign, then they were looking for conversions or downloads or website visits. And I think what we've learned is that content tends to be more effective when it's used more top of funnel, when it's more about engaging a customer, piquing their interest. It's more about awareness and bringing some value to them, but not necessarily asking to convert right away. And so I think as we've all kind of grown to understand that and have come to have metrics to back that up, that it's better for relationship building than converting, we've started to measure different things. We're looking more for things like engaged time. We're looking at things like scroll depth, or, looking at more soft metrics like maybe purchase intent, brand affinity, brand lift, things like that. Mm-hmm. Trying to measure very specific change in emotion or attitude toward a brand, which, you often have to do with sort of a layered in study or a focus group of some sort. But, using it as a tool just to learn more about customers and create a deeper relationship with them versus something that you create with this very hard objective of, I hope at the end of this video, they will click download and then convert at an average acquisition rate of this much and, have a lifetime customer value. It's just, we're starting to realize that it's much more of a relationship building tool than a direct conversion tool. And I think.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I love what you said there about they're going to watch that and then download it because that I think is how so many people behave, not realizing. But
I find that I make a lot of sort of relationship analogies, and that kind of helps people understand, right? In the early days of content marketing, everybody was that guy in the bar who walked in, only talked about himself, and then immediately asked someone to go home with him. And you only have to get turned down so many times before you realize maybe I should talk to people a little little more and ask questions about them and tell them about my hobbies and my friends and, get to know them for a little while before I try to convert immediately, and I'll have more long-term success, and I think as we've learned that, we've gotten to be better. It's a lot less clickbaity pickup artist kind of headlines and a lot more, how can I bring some value to these people that I hope will like me long-term?
I mean, I think it's interesting because, constantly, for as long as I've been doing some types of marketing for the past, couple of years, the term relationship always gets dropped into the conversation. And I think some people look at me like, oh, there's that relationship term. But they're only bringing that up because they themselves are not good relationship builders. I watch some of these people in their work, and they direct people in a very sort of flagrant manner. Hey, do this. They don't really know what other people are sensing. They then have an outbound approach to customers, which is very similar. Hey, we need the customers in the market to think this way, rather than really saying, hey, maybe we should ask people how they're feeling before you try to then convince them to do something that might not necessarily be the best mode of action. So it's funny because I think the reason we have relationships and relationship marketing is because it's easier for us to be connected, much like you and I are doing today, where I'm 3,000 miles away from you and we're still talking because we have electronic means of connection and more one-to-one. But, I think somewhere along the line there's still that divide where there's many marketers who either learned poorly through education or doing things within their own careers that they don't see marketing as relationship oriented or collaborative oriented in some respects. And I think that's where my next question turns to you, which is, who is really doing sort of this collaborative content marketing out there that, you can sense they really have a good idea of what their customer base is into. And so they're developing content that they know goes back to what you've stated. Hey, it's not about, closing a deal or getting a return on any investment. It's really about just understanding what the passions are of our customer base and possibly getting them to actually turn other people into customers for us. So what brands out there are you seeing that are really sort of on the cutting edge out there when it comes to content marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I think one brand that always sticks out, they're sort of a darling of the industry, is Netflix. I mean, they're really good about carefully identifying things that they have the authority to speak about, whether it's technology through their streaming network or whether it's, the topic of a given show, and then finding the exact right partner who has the audience for that type of content. They sort of hop around. They've had all these different partners. They sort of do one big piece, one big program with a bunch of different publishers, but it's not because they're hopping around or they don't know. It's actually the opposite. They know exactly when they have a content idea, who is the perfect publisher to help us execute something on this topic that can reach this audience. And so they've managed to create a really fantastic portfolio of content that's all done really well. They've been written up a good number of times and created some really great award-winning stuff. So I think they're definitely ahead of the curve. And maybe they know it. I don't know. I think they must have an idea. But this is kind of a smaller scale because one of the questions I get all the time is, well, I'm not Netflix and I don't have, a bazillion-dollar budget and I can't necessarily work with all these major publishers. I can't create content that people are going to engage with. And I think this hopefully is a good example. I believe the name is August Oak Wood. I don't know if you saw this example. It's like a local California, lumber and woodworking company, right? They do carpentry and they make furniture and things like that. Their video came across my Facebook feed with 15 million views on it. And what it is it's a wood play on these sort of hands and pans style recipe videos that you keep seeing on Facebook, right? You've got the bowl in the center and hands just pop in and drop in ingredients and mix and all that. So they did a version of that using wood. They put a scoop of wood chips, and they put, little pieces of dark wood and little pieces of light wood, and they mix it around, and then they add some wood glue, and they mix it around, and then they put it in what looks like an oven. And when they take it out, it's sort of like a wooden jewelry box. And, they use a knife to look as if they're cutting off the top layer, and it's the lid. So what they did is they kind of looked at this trend, these videos that are popping up on Facebook, and they don't have a huge marketing budget, I presume. They're not, this huge multinational corporation like a Netflix, but they said this is something we can create our own version of. That looking at it, you can see that it's not like a high budget production. It's like on the counter in the wood shop, probably, using everyday items they had around the shop. And what they created was something that really resonated with people. It's very similar in style, and for a small business to have amassed 15 million views like that, I mean, I never would have heard of this, living in New York, I never would have heard of this California, wood making company, and here I am using them as an example. So I think it just comes down to knowing what's going to resonate with your audience, because to your point earlier, it's so easy for us as marketers to think that everything we have to say is incredibly fascinating. And, we kind of gauge things by the would I click it rule. And we're all biased. We would all click on our own stuff, right? I mean, we would be curious. But the average consumer might not be. And so it's really important to be able to take a step back and put yourself in the shoes of your customer and not just you as a customer. Yeah. Because there is a difference. And I think that's an example of both Netflix and this local wood company being able to say, well, what are other people doing? What are other people into? And how could we bring some value there? So, I mean, there's definitely some folks out there who are good about having that sense of what their audience is actually interested in and playing into that and just recognizing that that's a spot where they can bring some value.
So this is really fascinating because I think it's again, I think for anyone who is listening to this particular episode, I think they're going to learn a lot in terms of, how to place themselves in the shoes of others, their customers, really before they're even mapping and producing a lot of this content. So I asked you, obviously, who's doing things that are visionary. Now let's put on the hat, and you don't have to name names. You could just say that the category they're in or the line of business they're in. We want to protect the innocent here. Who's not doing it the right way, that when you see it, you almost cringe because, and again, I think, as humans, we always can do things better. But my question really is, who's really doing it where it's just, they should never, they should maybe get out of the game altogether.
Well, I'll say this. It's a true mark of maybe not doing it well, because I couldn't tell you the brand if I wanted to. I don't really remember. But I will tell you that it's finance. Okay. It was a finance company. And what they created was essentially just a really lame attempt at humorous, informative video that amounted to nothing more really than a commercial for their products and services with a kitschy theme. And I think, again, it came down to now finance is in a tough spot. They're heavily regulated as an industry, and it makes it very hard for them to make content. They can't make recommendations about things, which makes it tough for them. And I totally understand and see those pressures, and have worked with clients who have had to work really hard to overcome that aspect of content creation. But I think what they default to is going back to sound bites and things that are already approved through their legal team, and that stuff is often the hard sell stuff from their commercials, And when you create content with a veil of trying to bring value, people know that. It's clear to them. If you can't just create the same content with the same script and just pretend up front like it's trying to be funny or valuable, people will know right off the bat. You need more than a good opener for the same commercial to make it content. And that's essentially what they did. They sort of opened with a funny joke line and then went straight into talking about their offering and their solution to the problem, which just made it, truthfully, it was just a commercial, and it didn't get the performance they were hoping for. And as a publisher, you get some of that blame, and then they go do it with someone else, and I presume had the same results. So it's always tough, especially for finance, but you can't just be creating content under the veil of bringing value. You actually have to want to bring value.
And that's a good term, probably, that we should continue to think about, which is value. How do you bring value? And do you find that when you are working on some interesting campaigns or when you're observing campaigns, can you see the value? Can you almost sense it when you're engaged with some content, when you know that they actually sat down and thought, hey, what's the reciprocal value of this? Let's think about that.
Yeah.
Which is different, I guess we should note, than a value proposition. Because I think when you say, hey, what's our value proposition, you start to get into advertising again, more than really thinking about what a takeaway would be for someone. So, do you think that's the place where everyone should start, which is, hey, what value do we want to drive from our initiative, and then map that back to sort of different types of engaging content, and then figuring out how to distribute that content. What are some of the things that go through your head when you're actually mapping out some of the projects or campaigns you've worked on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I always ask, if I have the chance to ask the advertiser or the agency up front, is what do you want people to come away with when they finish this content, whether it's watching it or reading it or whatever the case may be? What do you want to happen? And if the answer is we want them to know about our partnership, that's a great answer. We want them to, understand our commitment to the environment. That's a great answer. We want them to see the power of the community program that we have. Great answer. If the answer is we want them to download our ebook, we want them to go to our website and sign up for something, you're going to have trouble because people don't want to do those things. They don't, it's the Simon Sinek quote that, that I always come back to, where it's people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
That's right.
So, and that's kind of what I was getting at before. If someone's watching your video, you've kind of got to show, don't tell them, right? If someone watches the video and they say, wow, this community program that they have is really important and makes a difference, I now have decided personally that I want to be a part of that. Versus a video where you watch it and you're saying, please donate, please come help us with our program. You've got to show that value first before you ask something. And I think, as long as their goal is they want to inform someone, they want to entertain someone, they want to, help someone learn something. Those are all great things. And usually when, as humans, we experience those things, we want to give back. We want to take action. We have some sort of emotional reaction to it if we're shown instead of told. And so, those are the best campaigns where someone is saying, I really just want to teach, or I just want to entertain, or I just want to help them out.
Do you think that the reason that campaigns where someone is saying, hey, the call to action we want after this is to, get more lead generation or signups or someone to download something, or we want to make an actual sale, do you think that there's a disconnect because for a long period of time, marketing on the web was very inbound driven, meaning you'd search for something, you'd find it, and maybe it would lead you through some sort of journey. And then, there weren't many steps you necessarily had to take, and there wasn't as much distraction as there is now, noise and clutter. Do you think that's maybe one of the reasons why there's a large disconnect with some of the programs or campaigns that you've worked or consulted on, because there still sort of is this old thinking that might be bleeding over into the new world, so to speak, where, the example I gave on inbound marketing, that makes sense when search was really the only game in town. But now we have messaging and social and a number of other platforms, and also we have native advertising everywhere. So I find, when people say we want to just be upfront and get people to buy from us, do you think maybe the disconnect is that they don't realize how much things have maybe changed in the last 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, 100%. I think, anytime the status quo changes like that, it takes a while for people to catch up. I think we knew SEO was important long before we behaved like SEO was important. It took us a long time as an industry to sort of put into place the people and processes and resources to make sure that we were prioritizing it. And for many people, by the time they got a handle on it, it was almost too late. Now we're onto social.
Yeah.
And, you know, people are just getting to the point where they're like, yes, we've got our response times on social for customer service down. And now all of a sudden, you know, social is not as concerned. Now we're thinking more about messaging, to your point, or, you know, through the publisher channels where people already have that audience and they're going for more of a native approach. So there's always going to be a little bit of a game of catch up. And I think that while that is, you know, a little bit terrifying when you're being evaluated by how successful you are, I also think it's a really huge opportunity. There aren't that many industries where you could work and learn something every day. There aren't that many industries where you can actually be a part of creating a new process or new best practices year after year. And so I think for those of us who are willing to adapt and are willing to change, it's actually an incredible opportunity for us to be a part of that. And so, I mean, that's why I'm here. That's why I think it's exciting to be a part of. And so, yeah, I think it just does come down to a willingness to learn and a willingness to change and adapt your methods for the new reality.
Exciting times indeed. What's the future look like for content, you think? You know, always love to get your opinion on this area because I think you're so immersed in it that you probably see, you know, how things change day to day. But, you know, what do you think we will see and feel by 2020, which is only 4 short years away?
Oh, man. So I think I think we're going to have a measurement reckoning where someone's finally going to need to figure out how we measure all this stuff, or at least the different buckets, because I think every advertiser and every publisher and every piece of tech out there is measuring content and native advertising specifically in a different way. So I think there's going to have to be a little bit more of a leveling in terms of what we see as the key metrics across the industry. I think we're going to have a labeling reckoning, and I think that's going to be a little more legal, so we'll have to see how that plays out. But we've been the Wild West in terms of labeling for a little bit too long, and we're nearing that point where something's going to happen, some litigation is going to happen, and we're going to have a little bit of clarity about what the heck the FTC means by clarity when they say that we need to label clearly. So that's definitely on the horizon. I don't know if it'll be before the end of the year but definitely within the next few. And then the other thing is I think we're going to start to see more long-term partnerships forming. So I think for the better part of the last couple of years, we've really been doing a lot of experimenting, right? Like I was talking about, you sort of partner with one publisher and try a video, you partner with another, you know, influencer, and you try a social post, and you try this and you try that. And I think hopefully we're getting to a point where people are starting to, you know, individual publishers and individual advertisers have started to figure out what works for them. And so they don't need to risk as much. They don't need to experiment as much. And they're going to settle into sort of longer term partnerships with the folks that are the right partners, I hope. And so we'll start to see, instead of these sort of one-offs that kind of make a big splash, we're going to start to see more successful franchises and more successful long-term partnerships being built between powerhouse publishers and advertisers as they figure out this works. Now let's iterate on it instead of getting a little bit of positive information and then jumping to a new publisher in a new format. You know, so hopefully that will result in positive results for everyone, right? Better metrics for the advertiser, more long-term income for a publisher, and then, honestly, just better content for all of us to be consuming. That's my hope anyway.
So we're speaking with Melanie Deziel on our episode here of Disruptive FM. How do people see you this year? I know you love to speak, and I want to make sure that we like to take the post-digital theme on the show, which is, you know, if people hear or connect with someone on a digital platform, that, you know, obviously the best thing is then to meet in person, which is really what, you know, I think where the future is moving. So where can we see you speak? What are some dates that you know that you'll be at that you sort of want to give a plug to yourself? And then also, how do they connect with you online? Where do you live?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is to find me on my website, mdeziel.com, or sign up for my newsletter through overlapleague.com. And there you'll get all my information for whatever network is your favorite. And I always share when I confirm a new event, or especially nice perk when I get some discounts for anyone who wants to come. But I will be at Digital Summit LA in early April. I will also be at Digital Media Europe and the Webit Festival out in mid to late April, Bulgaria and Vienna. I'm going to be at Collision Conference in New Orleans in April, so it's going to be a busy next couple months.
Awesome. And I think you and I are speaking at a number of the Digital Summit series, and a couple things that are, I think, in the far off yonder in like June and July. So we'll make sure we put some reminders there. And where are you online? Where can people connect with you if they have questions for you or just want to continue the conversation?
Yeah, definitely. So my website, mdiesel.com. I'm mdiesel pretty much anywhere you'll look, with the exception of Instagram, where I'm Mel Deziel. But yeah, mdiesel on Twitter. You could find me on LinkedIn, wherever you're most comfortable. And happy to answer questions or let you know where I'll be speaking next.
Awesome. This is a great conversation. We have to get you on another episode because I love the way your mind works, especially in this area. And for those who are just wondering, Melanie Deziel, Deziel, just in case you have trouble using the search engine to find her. Just wanted to make sure we spelled that correctly for all of our listeners. Melanie, thanks for being a part of this episode of Disruptive FM.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to an episode of Disruptive FM, the marketing podcast for eccentric minds. Remember to subscribe to the show on iTunes. Purchase a copy of Jeffrey's latest book, Disruptive Marketing, on Kindle, hardcover and audio. Signing off from the city of Seattle. Press pause.